When I was younger, the attic in our house was nothing more than a storage space, dusty, forgotten, and utterly unremarkable. It was a place I never ventured into, especially since it lacked air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. However, everything changed in the summer of 2005 when the attic was renovated into a playroom for my sister and me. It was furnished with two TVs, a couch, and a single narrow window. Two closet doors concealed storage spaces that remained perpetually cold, dark, and damp no matter the season. The first sign that something was wrong happened one night after I had finished playing a video game. As I turned off the console, the TV emitted a deep, rhythmic thumping from within its screen, like the steady, ominous beat of a heart. The sound persisted, faint but distinct, reverberating through the room. I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing, but even now, that sound still haunts the attic. The next truly unsettling event occurred when my friend Kim and I were in one of the attic closets. We had just stepped inside, flicking on the dim overhead light. Without warning, a framed picture that had been resting securely on a box slid forward and crashed onto the floor with a sharp, echoing thud. We both froze, our breaths caught in our throats. There was no draft, no movement from either of us that could have disturbed it. The air in the closet grew thick, heavy, oppressive. We exchanged wide-eyed glances before backing out of the closet, slamming the door shut behind us. For a time, things settled down, or at least I thought they had. Then one night, as I sat alone on the couch in the living room, I heard it, footsteps, rapid, frantic footsteps pounding along the furnace vent in the hallway, as if something was running. My pulse quickened. I forced myself to stand and cautiously stepped toward the hallway. The air felt charged, the silence suffocating. But when I looked, there was nothing there. Relieved yet uneasy, I turned back toward the living room, and that was when it happened. The attic door, with no warning, no explanation, slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. The sound echoed through the house, rattling my bones. My chest tightened as icy fear clawed its way up my spine. I bolted up the stairs, my heart hammering. In my ears, the window in the attic was closed. The air was still, but the door had slammed on its own, and I was completely alone. After that, the disturbances became infrequent, almost as if the presence, whatever it was, had lost interest. The house itself wasn't old, only 15 years, built by my stepfather with his own hands. There were no tragic histories, no lingering spirits, at least none that we knew of. Yet, there is one last memory that lingers in the depths of my mind, a memory so distant yet so vivid that it feels more like a nightmare than reality. When I was 3 years old, lying in my parents' bed, I saw something, a creature, twisted and unnatural, crawling down the hallway toward me. Its movements were jerky, its form shadowy and indistinct. Yet I knew, with every ounce of my tiny being, that it wasn't human. Terror had paralyzed me, my voice stolen. I remember my parents jolting awake to my screams, their desperate attempts to calm me. They had to turn the lights on 3 times before I would even consider closing my eyes. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know what lurks in the corners of my attic. And I don't know if it ever really left. This story is about a rather small abandoned town. This town is called Old Dora. Now, I know I have mentioned this town before, but in that story, I only talked about what was going on inside the old Methodist church there. This time, I'm going to tell you some of the things that have happened in and around the other buildings around Old Dora. I guess we'll first start off with the old furniture store. Me and my cousin Sean had been ghost hunting a few weeks back, so we decided to go and check out some of the old buildings in the forgotten town. So, we hopped into my car and drove down there. We parked in front of the old furniture store. We couldn't go in the top floor. It was falling in and we didn't want to risk having it fall in with us. So we went back behind the building to find an open basement door. We walked inside, and there was an instant chill in the air. Well, we started walking around, trying to communicate with the spirits and such, and then I walked into the middle of the basement. There was nothing around, me that I could have snagged myself on. I have a wallet chain, and as I was standing there looking towards the stairs that went us to the first floor, I felt a tug at my chain. I looked back to see if it was Sean, but Sean was on the other side of the room. I looked down in time to see my chain hovering in the air beside my waist, but then it fell back into place. I told Sean about it excitedly, so we decided maybe to go up the stairs to the first floor and see if we could see anything. So I start walking up the stairs, and as soon as I reach the top one, Sean goes, "Whoa!" And then he jumps down and starts running towards the back of the room. I asked what it was, and he said he saw a black shadow-looking figure crouching down, and as soon as he noticed it, it took off. But there was nothing in the room, and nowhere it could have hid. There is a building right beside the furniture store, but this place is locked up tightly. Well, we decided to joke around, so I knocked on the wood they had placed over the windows and said, "Anybody home?" As soon as I finished my sentence, something knocked back at us. It couldn't have been somebody messing around, because this building has been locked up since the town was first abandoned. And it's locked up so securely, I doubt anyone could have gotten inside. Now for our last portion of this story, the train station. The top floor of this building is gone completely, rotted away. So we shimmied our way over to the stairs leading down to the basement. The stairs looked like something out of a horror movie. They were tilted to the side. Well, we walked down there to find that the floor was now nothing more than a huge pile of rubbish. I hopped over onto this old mattress and stared up at the large hole in the ceiling which would have been the first floor's floor. And suddenly from the opposite direction of the door, meaning whatever did this was on the other side of the very large hole no one could get across. I'm just standing there, and I hear these footsteps, soft at first, but as they neared the large hole, they got heavier. And an old magazine fell from the hole and landed at my feet. It was an old-time magazine. Well, that pretty much wraps up some of the things that have happened in that old abandoned town. Hope you liked it. Be safe and happy hauntings. I'm about to tell you two events that occurred in or around my home. The first being when I was 7 years old. It's about my Uncle Eugene. Eugene was my hero. From the time I was 2 until I was 7, he was the person I looked up to the most. My mother had passed away when I was 2, leaving my world shattered. I moved in with my grandparents and my uncle, while my father relocated to another town. Though I still saw my dad every weekend, my daily life revolved around Eugene. He was more than an uncle. He was a mentor, a friend, and the person I admired the most. Then, tragedy struck again. I still remember the chaos of that evening. The flashing lights from the ambulance, the hurried voices of the paramedics, and the sight of Eugene being placed on a stretcher and carried out of our house. He was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do. He had suffered a fatal asthma attack, just like my mother before him. That night, grief consumed me. I cried myself to sleep, inconsolable. My grandmother, sensing the overwhelming weight of Eugene's absence, decided that my sister and I should sleep in her room for a few nights. His room was right next to ours, and the emptiness of it was unbearable. The night after he passed, my grandmother turned off the lights, and my sister quickly drifted into sleep. I, however, have always struggled with falling asleep. I lay awake for what felt like hours, lost in my sorrow and thoughts. At some point, I opened my eyes again and noticed a strange glow. There was a light on somewhere in the house. Confused, I looked to my left and right. My sister and grandmother were sound asleep. My grandfather was still at work. My pulse quickened as I slowly sat up in bed and peered through the doorway. The light was coming from Eugene's room. A cold wave of dread swept over me. I stared at his door, unable to move. Then, the breathing machine in the kitchen, his breathing machine, turned on. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. frozen in place. I heard the distinct, rhythmic sound of someone breathing into it. The sound was unmistakable. I had heard it countless times before when Eugene had to use the machine. During his asthma attacks, panic surged through me. I threw myself back down onto the bed, squeezing my eyes shut as tightly as I could. I willed myself to disappear, to drown out the sound, to erase what I had just witnessed. Somehow, against all odds, exhaustion finally claimed me, and I drifted into sleep. Even now, years later, that night remains etched in my memory. I don't know what I saw or heard, but I know it happened. Whether it was Eugene's spirit lingering, a desperate farewell, or something beyond comprehension, I'll never know. That was the story about my uncle. Now, let me tell you about what happened at my great-grandmother's house. Nestled deep in a city full of new businesses and luxury car dealerships lies a relic of history, shrouded in eerie tales of tragedy. Sloss Furnaces, once a thriving pig iron-producing blast furnace, operated from 1882 to 1971. During its industrial peak, the site witnessed numerous gruesome deaths. Workers crushed in grinding machines, others meeting their fate in molten iron. Laborers endured some of the harshest conditions imaginable, especially those stationed near the roaring furnaces during the dead of winter. Survivors described the experience as a relentless torment. Burned on one side, frozen on the other. If you wish to verify these accounts, visit their official website. Today, while parts of the site are still used as an iron mill, the main buildings, those cloaked in shadows and whispers, stand abandoned. These are the very structures rumored to be the most haunted. My friends and I had the misfortune, or perhaps the privilege, of uncovering the truth for ourselves. Our journey to Sloss Furnaces took place in late May of 2006. We had never set foot there before, nor did we know if we were even permitted to explore. Undeterred, we wandered inside, eventually coming across some workers on the far side of the property. We hesitated before approaching them, but our curiosity won out. When we asked if we could conduct an investigation, their boss surprisingly agreed. Not only did he grant us permission, but he also provided chilling details about the site's grim history. Even more unsettling, he shared his own personal encounters with the unexplained. With his blessing, we ventured into the heart of the furnace. The moment we stepped inside, the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness. As we navigated the rusting catwalks and cavernous chambers, the haunting manifestations began. A lone pipe, suspended from the ceiling, swayed rhythmically as though an invisible force guided it. Footsteps echoed on the steel catwalk above us, though when we looked, there was no one there. But the most terrifying moment was yet to come. Out of the darkness, a full-bodied apparition emerged, pausing just long enough for us to register its presence before melting back into the shadows. There were more incidents, more moments of sheer terror, but some experiences are better left to be witnessed firsthand. If you dare, visit Sloss Furnaces and judge for yourself. But be warned, the past never truly rests. Thanks for reading, and stay safe. Happy hauntings. One night, when I was around 6 or 7 years old, I lost my second tooth. The excitement of the Tooth Fairy's visit filled me with anticipation. Carefully, I placed my tiny tooth under my pillow, eager for the dollar bill that would surely appear in its place by morning. Like most children, I was too thrilled to sleep. The darkness never scared me, so I lay in bed with my light off, my bedroom door slightly ajar as my mother preferred. My bed, a high old thing, was pushed against the wall near the window. Whenever I struggled to sleep, I would pull the blinds aside, sit up, and peer outside into the vast front yard. Our house, the last on the left at a dead end, stood isolated. There were no streetlights, and the yard stretched over an acre, leaving the house set far back from the street. My window faced a road, with a large azalea bush several feet in front of it. That night, the full moon bathed everything in a ghostly glow, illuminating the yard enough to see movement. As I gazed outside, a strange sight caught my eye, a bright orb of greenish yellow light drifting toward my window from the street. It was mesmerizing, growing larger as it glided down the yard. Just as it neared my window, it veered around the azalea bush and vanished behind the house. This was no flashlight, no ordinary trick of the light. The orb hovered about 5 feet from the ground, roughly the size of an adult's fist. No footsteps, no figures, just a silent, floating glow. My breath caught in my throat. My young mind, untainted by skepticism, leaped to a single conclusion. I had just witnessed a tooth fairy, heart pounding with excitement and a twinge of guilt. I ducked under my blankets, squeezing my eyes shut. What if she knew I had seen her? Would she refuse to take my tooth? My thoughts swirled with childish wonder until sleep eventually claimed me. For years, I barely gave that night a second thought. At that age, the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny were as real as the air I breathed. I saw nothing unusual, nothing unexplainable, just a magical moment. But now, looking back, the memory remains vivid, the details still sharp, and yet I find myself questioning, what exactly did I see that night?